Welcome to a special edition of Talks at Columbia. My name is Jason Wingard, Dean of the School of Professional Studies. We are here tonight for a very special edition of Talks at Columbia to talk about the role of sports in higher education. Now, the School of Professional Studies prepares professionals for the global demands of today and tomorrow. We prepare students, graduate students getting master's degrees, we prepare alumni around the world from Columbia University, and we prepare a whole network of other stakeholders who we support. So Talks at Columbia is a thought series, a thought leadership series, and it allows us to do lifelong learning. So lifelong learning is what the School of Professional Studies is all about. We help professionals prepare to learn for life. Talks at Columbia is a vehicle which is going to allow all of you and all of those out in the digital sphere to learn with us tonight. We have an esteemed group of leaders from Columbia University Athletics. I'd like to introduce them now. We have to my left Peter Pilling, who's the Campbell Family Director of Intercollegiate Athletics and Physical Education. We have Megan Griffith, who's the head coach of women's basketball. We have Al Bagnoli, who's the Patricia and Shepard Alexander head coach of football. And we have finally Jim Engels, who is the head coach of men's basketball. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's start with some trends in higher education and trends in sports in higher education. So we know that there's decreasing admission rates. At Columbia, we know 5.5% admission rate for students who apply. Not many students get in. We also know that there's unprecedented globalization. So more and more students from around the world are coming to universities like Columbia. We know that the cost is prohibitive for many students. So $70,000 to go to Columbia each year, 7-0. It's prohibitive for many people, but 50% of students at Columbia get financial aid, so that helps substantially. And then career placement, something that is really particularly important to the School of Professional Studies, is very difficult. And arts and sciences education at Columbia, or liberal arts education anywhere in the world for that matter, doesn't yield the kind of skills that some employers are looking for, so the curriculum is being enhanced. When we look specifically at sports, one of the trends that is emerging is around amateurism and pay. Should athletes in college be paid to participate? So something that's continuing to happen in the world of sports because of the role, the NCAA does not allow it currently for students to be paid to participate in college. But what happens is there are end-arounds, workarounds, where agents are trying to entice student athletes who are going to be professionals to sign with them. So they engage them early, maybe in AAU club sports, and they try to give them money or give them their families money. Other cases include coaches who were skirting the rules. So we just recently realized Rick Pitino from the University of Louisville was fired and exiled, if you will, from the NCAA for some of the practices that he and the school were accused of. You have agents, like at USC with Heisman Trophy winner Reggie Bush, who got in trouble for engaging the family and paying the athlete ahead of time before they became professionals. So Peter, we'll start with you. The Rice Commission just last week released a report for college basketball with recommendations, and the Rice Commission was Condoleezza Rice and the NCAA. I asked Condoleezza to put together a commission and give recommendations by way of a report. It's a 52-page report with recommendations on whether or not athletes should be paid for participation or for their likeness. There's the Olympic rule. So what do you think, Peter? Should athletes be paid or should they not?
Well, we're a little different, obviously, at Columbia because we don't give athletic scholarships. So all of our student athletes are accepted and they receive blind-based financial aid. I believe that there'll be this evolution where eventually they'll be able to receive some type of compensation for likeness and image within the parameters of what they're trying to do. I don't think they'll ever get full pay as it will be to become an employee, but I believe that there'll be the opportunity for them to receive some type of image and likeness compensation associated with an expertise that they may have as they enter college. You know, a lot of, if you think about, we have a student athlete on our wrestling team right now that has a huge social media following. And as a result of that, he's able to generate some funds. We spent a lot of time working with the NCAA to make sure that we maintain that in a way that it wasn't directly associated with him being a student athlete at Columbia, but yet he still had the flexibility of generating some additional dollars outside of that, and we were able to achieve that. So I think that's the one area where there'll be a little flexibility and allow some outside compensation. I don't believe there'll be the time or the day where we'll be compensating straight out based upon their athletic talents.
So Jim, let's build on that. So when I was in college, I played football and ran track at Stanford, and I received a scholarship. And so many detractors who are against paying athletes to play in college sports would say, well, if you received a scholarship like I did, that's your compensation. That's good enough. Do you agree with that? What do you think about whether athletes should be paid or not? And what are the implications on an ongoing basis if we don't pay players?
You know, I was a Division III basketball player, so I was more along the lines of the Ivy League model. So when I went to play basketball at Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, it was an investment more in my education through my family and through working on campus and doing stuff like that. Being a coach at the different levels that I've been at, the scholarship, you know, I think what Peter said, along with the Rice Commission, is they don't want to pay because it becomes a more professional model, and then where does it really become a difference between being a pro and then being a college athlete? So I think it's going to be hard for them to justify paying a student athlete like yourself. Now, I'm sure you probably wanted to make a lot of money when you were in college. But I mean, you know, kids are getting paid. They're getting a scholarship. You know, Stanford's probably about 70 grand right now as well.
That's
and
right. Yeah.
You're getting full scholarship. You're getting housing. You basically travel like you work at Google or Apple. I mean, most of these guys charter flights. Yeah. Some of the facility structures that they have are MBA structures. I mean, some of the schools at that level are basically, I mean, they don't want for anything. And so I think I read somewhere that one BCS school, Power 5 school, said that they spend about $150,000 per kid on their team. So now they're not getting that through cash,
an
but
investment.
That's what they're able to experience in their 4 years at the school. And I don't know the school, but I just read that somewhere. So, you know, I like the Ivy League model. I think in a lot of ways it would never go that way, but when you invest in your education and there's something that you have to, you know that there's something that you own, you take it probably a little bit more seriously. I think the way the Ivy League is based, it is academics and athletics, whereas sometimes when you get to a higher level, it's more about, well, am I going to play professionally? And the academics take a secondary piece to that. So I don't think we'll ever get to the Ivy League model, but I really like the fact that you do invest in your education, and the academics are as important as anything you do as anything you do sports-wise.
That's good. So Columbia University was originally chartered and began offering classes in 1754, a long time ago. A little trivia, it wasn't Columbia University, it was King's College. I'm sure you all knew that. 100 years later, the first sport started to be played at Columbia. Baseball was the first, followed a couple years later by football. For many years, Columbia did really well in athletics and performed at a very high level. In the 1990s and early 2000s, there was a bit of a gap, we'll call it, in success.
Very nice, very nice.
So this drought was experienced for quite a while, where Columbia athletics wasn't doing well. Now, the good news is in the last couple of years, that tide has shifted, and Columbia is now starting to emerge victorious across many sports. And so we're seeing a lot of success. So Al, I'll turn to you. So during your time at Penn, 9 Ivy League championships, you still have the highest winning percentage at the top of the FCS, the football championship subdivision. So a lot of success there. Your team now at Columbia is most visibly changing and transforming into a highly successful program. So you've taken a franchise that year over year, football in particular, was doing very, very badly, and you have transformed it now to be a league contender, right? So, and we're going to win this year. So we're really excited about what you are.
Sound like an alum.
That's right. That's right. We're excited about what you're going to do this year. Congratulations, prematurely.
What pressure?
No need to play the games.
That's right.
Yep.
From a leadership standpoint, from a process standpoint, however you want to describe it, how did you do it? How did you transform a team that literally had no wins to being a contender for the Ivy League championship?
Right. I mean, it's obviously I could talk a real long time on that. So let me try to give you the condensed version. When we got there, we had to identify what was wrong. And we started off with, it became obvious that the kids were not having any fun in an extracurricular activity. And so we had to somehow do a couple of different things. A, make it fun. B, instill some trust between players and coaches. So we had to have all kinds of opportunities to kind of get to know each other. They were not our recruits. We were not their coaches that recruited them. So we spent an awful lot of time just really trying to go through the process of getting to know each other. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your issues. Tell me what you like, what you don't like, and just trying to get a handle on some of these issues. And so we went from there to then trying to get into what I call psychological warfare, because their mental state was not great. And so we really had to change the culture of the entire program. And so we started off by doing some out-of-the-box type stuff. So we held some coaches seminars and talked about a lot of buzzwords such as grit and accountability and everything else. We then gave them a self-help book that they had to read called The Slight Edge, which is really a book that tells you if you can do routine things on a consistent basis and do them well, that eventually those small things turn out to be big things. We then wanted to shame them a little bit to try to take them and get them to work a little bit harder. So we got this huge archery thing that you would associate with an archery team. We had the bullseye in the middle, and that was you're good enough to be a champion. On the outside, you're not good enough. And then we put kids' names in based on their participation in a lot of different factors. Put it in the weight room, and every day the kids had to walk by and find out where their names were. And it wasn't based just on football. It was based on, did you go to class? How you doing in school? What were your grades? How did you do with the strength coaches? How did you do with the trainers? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we transitioned from that, and this last year we had the Navy SEALs in for something called the program. Okay. And so we had them for 48 hours where they were carrying logs around. And then they were at the pool 5 a.m. in full sweats. And thank God they're the world's best lifeguards. We had a lot of guys in there gasping. So we really tried to approach it a lot of out-of-the-box thinking, just to kind of get kids to understand that this is team, there's trust involved, there's a relationship and a dynamic, and that there's really a lot of small things they can control and do a much better job of. And it seems to be paying off, but it's been a 3-year ordeal.
Mm-hmm. So Megan, let's turn to you in women's basketball, another transformation story. So you went to Columbia College, graduated in 2007, played women's basketball, scored 1,000 points, went on to play professionally, right? So quite successful. Then you went on to Princeton to coach women's teams there, and so you experienced Ivy League championships at Princeton, and then you came to Columbia. And in your first year, you had the best out-of-conference record in Columbia's history. So a lot of success also in the women's basketball program. So pivot off of what Coach Bagnoli talked about. What did you do that was similar or different in order to transform the women's basketball program as quickly and successfully as you have been able to do?
As Al had touched on, I really do think it's a process. And that's something that Peter actually, when he hired me, about 3 years ago almost now, he said you have to trust the process, like every day. And he would remind me, he'd come to my office, tell me the same thing.
Sounds like the 76ers, huh?
Yeah. And even in like the low moments, you come off of a couple game losing streak, and he's like, Megan, trust the process, shooting me texts. And, so I think it really starts from, top down. And to have a leader like that, that has instilled that, trust in us and ability for us to really go out and perform and work with our teams the way we need to, I think has really helped. So, walking into the program, as Al said, from jump, the number one thing I wanted to do was meet the team. It had nothing to do with like, oh, let's do it tomorrow. And I was like, no, right now. Peter's like, are you sure? And I was like, yep, let's do it right now. And it was just, we had a conversation, and our team is way smaller than a football team. So, I knew most of the girls by name. So I think I knew almost all of them except maybe a couple. And, I'd played against them for a few years then and coached against them. And so, we sat down and just had really honest conversations about where are you at? Where, what is this like for you? What has this transition period been for you? So getting to know them and get them to trust you was the absolute number one thing in priority for me as a coach. And two, there was a credibility that was built in because I had done it, and I was there, and I had walked their shoes. And I think for them, that was something that was really nice for me, is that I think they let their guard down a little bit from the jump. So, fast forward a couple years, you have some kids that you're trying to figure out, did you buy in, did you not? But the buy-in, the culture, those things that we talk a lot about, it's all about the steps you take and how much you really invest into people. And that, for me, has been really important to our growth.
So Jim, there's a common theme here. You took over the men's basketball program. You went from last place to a league contender as well. So again, a lot of early successful transition and winning. We talked a little bit about the Sixers and the process. The question I want to ask you is, when you have a team, and these teams, each of these teams, men's basketball, women's basketball, men's football, here on stage, had a recent history of losing. And so when you have a history of losing, it sort of bakes into the DNA of the organization. Instead of having a culture of excellence, you sort of have this culture of loss, right? So when you took over the program, and if you think about what the Sixers have been able to do, they had, for those of you who don't know, the Philadelphia 76ers is an NBA team, and they purposefully lost for many, many years so that they could get high draft picks to bring in good talent to hopefully win one day. So they have that good talent now, but there's still that DNA of losing, and many people criticize them because they're so used to losing that even when you get the good players, you don't know how to win. You're not used to it. You don't have an organization that's really rooted in winning in that kind of approach. So taking over a program that has been losing, what did you do to reverse the expectation that we're going to win? It's expected that we're going to win. We're going to play and act and prepare like we're going to win. What did you have to do to be able to make that transition?
Well, the situation that I took over wasn't what these two took over. It's an interesting situation. It's an interesting fact, but the team that I coached prior to coming to Columbia, they actually ended my coaching career at the former school that I was at, because we played Columbia in the CIT semifinals. So it put an end to my old coaching career, and gave me a new start here at a new school. So my aspect was just building on taking over a team with expectations. And so with the team that had won the CIT championship, and Kyle Smith had left to come actually to San Francisco, so I had to take over something that was a little bit different than what Al and Megan went through. And the big thing that I think that we're trying to go through now is, with when you set down, I think the big thing when you talk about culture is setting an identity as well. I think putting your identity down is, everybody talks about the word culture. I think putting your identity down really is the thing that allows your culture to take hold. And we have had some starts and stops in the 2 years that we've been here, and I think we've started to put our identity for what we're trying to do. Being in New York City, we've talked about some things about, I think when you are connected to New York, there's an instant toughness that you should have. I think I grew up in New York City, so New York is basically the capital of basketball. I think people would probably argue that if there's some people from different cities, but you look at some of the parks and how kids grow up in the parks and how they sort of create their identity of the player that they're at. So, that's some of the things that we've had to deal with over the last 2 years, and I'm excited about what our team is going to accomplish here as we get into year 3.
Mm-hmm. So Peter, you have built a culture of excellence athletics-wide, at Columbia University. So in a very short period of time, you've hired the right coaches. They were winners. They brought that winning to them, with them to Columbia University. So how does that culture of excellence transition to the student body? So a lot of times people say, well, what is the influence of a strong athletics program at a university on the general student body? How does that motivate the other students around campus, the faculty, the administrators? What kind of an impact does building a good, solid athletic program at Columbia University that wins, what does that do for the university?
Well, I think if you look at Columbia, there's so much excellence around the campus. If you think about what's going on in Manhattanville, all the different programs, the journalism program, the business school, the law school, the medical programs, they're ranked as School of Professional Studies, the sports management program, exactly. They're all ranked near the top throughout the country, and so we want to contribute to that excellence. We believe that, you know, if you're a general student, more than just your classroom, you should have multiple aspects of your educational experience, whether it be to go to cultural events, but also to go to sporting events. And so we want to try to make sure that we contribute to that overall excellence for the campus. And we're fortunate to have a president that believes in the role of athletics. We're fortunate to have 7 trustees at the university. They're former student athletes. They understand the role that athletics played in their lives. And so we're always looking for ways that we can contribute. And it was great this fall, you know, when the football team had the success that they had, to kind of see a little bit different step around campus. And Dean Valentini would talk about, you know, the role that football played this fall on the campus, and to see kind of a different level of excitement, and see what happened around homecoming, and to see our student body charge the field. It was really, really gratifying from that aspect of it. And then also, you know, ultimately, we want to make sure that our student athletes know that they're supported in all aspects of their lives. And that's really what makes the Ivy League different than anywhere else, is that we have this true balance between academics and athletics. And, you know, if you talk about our coaches and their role, it's a really complicated role that they have. They're more than just coaching their particular sports programs. You know, they're educators and they're mentors, and they're guidance counselors and team psychologists, and all the different aspects of what they're trying to do. And they fill a lot of different roles and a lot of different capacity associated with these remarkable young men and young women that compete for our teams.
Yeah. So Al, let's pick up on Peter's comment about academic excellence. So when we talk about recruiting, right? And so recruiting at Columbia University, recruiting for an Ivy League school is difficult. There's a challenge of identifying the student athlete who is qualified to attend Columbia University, who can be part of that 5.5% that gets admitted, so that they can get admitted and then be prepared to do well in school once they're admitted, but then also that they have the talent to perform on the field or on the court or in the pool, right? We know that there's some challenges to recruiting associated with academics. We know that there's challenges associated with not being on TV, at least during the regular season, national TV. The facilities may not be the same as some other school, whether it's Division I, II, or III, that other schools may have in some cases. So what do you do to recruit student athletes to Columbia University? And I know you participate in recruiting all students, not just football, but what do you do to try to help recruit them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is you have to really go nationwide now. Our whole league has become a national, if not international, recruiting.
Yeah.
And so to find the right kid, because you need the correct fit, and so you have the variables of the academic side of things, you have the variables on the talent level, because you want kids that you're trying to compete for a championship, kids that have the ability at some day, hopefully, to play on Sundays. And then you also have the financial aid issues. You know, you mentioned we're 70,000 plus, and so there's a wide range of kids that you deal with, some being no aid and pay the whole freight, some being full need kids and they get everything paid for. So when you look at the combination of everything that you need, it forces you to really cast a wide net. And so that's the first thing you have to do. You really have to be global. There's not enough kids in New York, there's not enough kids in New England, there's not enough kids in the Middle Atlantic state, on the East Coast, to ever fill that void. So you have to go nationally. Now, once you do that and you identify a kid, I think you have to assess the kid. To us, the first thing we look at is the kid's competitiveness. And so to me, if the kid has great competitiveness, it shows in everything that he does. So he's competitive in the classroom because they're taking the exact same courses as a kid who's not an athlete. They're competitive in the weight room, they're competitive on the running track, they're competitive in practice, they're competitive in doing everything. And if you can find that mix of a kid that really has that competitiveness along, hopefully with a great work ethic, then you've got a gem. So he's going to compete, he's going to succeed academically, he's going to do what's required, he's going to push himself, and at the same time, you're going to have a kid that athletically you're going to be really happy with.
So Megan, let's turn to you. Also recruiting. What would you say the value proposition is of coming to Columbia to play women's basketball? If you are talking to a young woman and her family, and she's considering Harvard, and she's considering Dickinson, and she's considering Notre Dame, maybe she wouldn't be normally considering.
Interesting
Okay.
range.
It's quite a range.
You throw Connecticut in.
How about Connecticut? Any other
I
schools?
mean,
Right?
yeah, Stanford.
School of choice, right?
Yeah.
How do you sell Columbia against fill in the blank?
So I think I should be insulted that you two did it.
It was a compliment.
Absolutely. New York is different, bottom line. There's no elephant in the room there. New York City is an extremely special place, and you need people that want to be in New York City. And for me, you have to illuminate that like from the very beginning of recruiting. They need to know where we are. We're not in Times Square. So all that, like, you think New York City? No, we're not in Times Square. So getting people to campus, I think, Jason, is one of the absolute most important things, is so that they can see it for themselves, to see that this is a gated community, it's a neighborhood, it's a place where people are going to take care of you. We have things and support systems that other Ivy League schools do not have. So for me, we try to highlight that first, and then also we are building something. So building something has to be special to people, and if it's not, then this is not the right place for you. If you want to go be a number, that's fine, but we need people that want to come and change the program and change the culture. So we talk a lot about those things, and then to jump on what Al said about being competitive, the word we like to use a lot, we use grit, we use toughness, but if you don't have it, you cannot play for me. And it's just, that's something that we know that, and to change what we're doing is you have to be that, like, and that's what New York City is to me. It's gritty, it's edgy. So our team theme is the Columbia Edge, and it's an acronym for energy, discipline, grit, and excellence. And that's what we sell and we talk about every day, before practice, after practice, during practice. We try to make it something that they feel and they breathe and they smell and they eat, and so that for me is important.
You should trademark that. Sounds good.
We'll see. Who wants to come?
Jason, we also use the term only here, and we really feel like we have a distinct advantage. We're at one of the top institutions in the world, in one of the greatest cities in the world. And with all due respect to Hanover and Ithaca, we have something that they don't have. And whatever you want to study, whatever you want to pursue, whatever careers, we're 3 or 4 or 5 subway stops away from an introduction with a Columbia grad that it can really provide, mentoring and internship opportunities that nobody else has. So I feel like New York City's in a great place right now, and the Columbia's in a great place right now, and it's almost this little bit of this perfect storm, and our athletic program is starting to take off. So we feel like we're positioned well to contribute to that success and to the overall success of our student athletes.
Well, you each have sold me. I'll sign me up for Columbia, right? One of the challenges that student athletes are facing now, and administrators and coaches are facing, is that the divide between being a student athlete and being a student, there used to be a wall there. There used to be a discernible distinction between managing the athletic experience on campus and managing their academic experience on campus. But Peter, now one of the things that we're seeing is that mental health issues are starting to elevate on campus, and particularly for student athletes. So when you are a student athlete in college in general, but particularly if you are at an Ivy League institution where the academics, as we've talked about before, are so demanding, the pressure of doing well in school and the pressure of doing well on the court, following the EDGE philosophy, can be overwhelming for some. And so what kinds of resources are available to students in general? Speaking as an athletic director, what kinds of resources are available to students to support this? This factors into the recruiting question too, because many parents ask, who's going to take care of my child when they can't handle it? So breakdowns are occurring. How do you help your coaches and the athletic community deal with that?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, the statistic is 1 out of every 4 college students will experience depression at some time during their college experience now. And so last week we actually co-sponsored with the NCAA a seminar on mental health, and we talked a lot about support and making sure that we're there for those student athletes in all aspects of their lives. So whether it be a team psychologist, or whether it be a full-time nutritionist, or whether it be just assisting them in every way, shape, or form. And especially those members of our staff that are forward-facing. You talk about the trainers, you talk about the strength and conditioning coaches, obviously our coaches from all aspects. They need to be cognizant of the complexities of these students' lives. And when a challenge presents itself, we want to make sure that we're there to support them, obviously academically and athletically, but emotionally and physically, and all those different aspects of where we need. And I think that that's something that resonates with our staff. We had the JED Foundation come in a couple years ago and talk about the complexities of those different issues and just looking for signs. And we've had to deal with some of those issues, unfortunately, with some of our student athletes, but I feel like they know that we care about them. It was interesting, this came up in the seminar last week with the NCAA. When you hurt your knee, you go to the trainer and you say, my knee's hurt, and then you go to the team doctor and they look at your knee, and one of the aspects of mental health is sometimes young men and young women don't come in and just go, I don't feel good, and they feel, the onus to take it upon themselves to solve their own problems. And so I really feel like there needs to be this transformation if you're having mental health issues, whether it be stress or anxiety or depression, that you know that you have a path to reach out, to communicate. And I think that's one of the most important messages that we have as administrators and coaches and members of our staff, is to know that these student athletes can reach out to help them with whatever problems they have, and we're there for them. And the university is incredibly supportive. We have a number of psychologists on campus that can support our student athletes, but ultimately we want them to know that we take this holistic approach to their lives, and we want to support them in any way, shape, or form that they need support.
So Megan, let's continue on this thread. You were a student athlete at Columbia, and so you know what it's like to have to prepare for tests, have to study. You have somewhat of a social life, I'm sure, but then you're also at practice, and you're doing training, and you're away on games, and so you're away for stretches. So the time just gets away from you, and you don't have the ability to do it. How can you now as a coach, so you know that you understand the experience as a student athlete, but now as a coach, how can you use your captains? How can you use your leaders on your team, maybe the seniors, to be able to help look for some of the signs of instability that some of the athletes may be having, to provide that kind of outlet? Look for trouble, advise them to go to the counselor, the psychologist, or to faculty members. Do you use your leaders to not only help with team and practice, but also with these kinds of mental health issues?
Absolutely. I think that we need to have a pulse within the team, because they're going to be different in front of Al, Jim, and myself than they are with their, their buddies. And the nice thing about our athletic department in the enrichment services department, which Peter touched on, which is, we have everything from sports psychology to industry to career building to, one-on-one tutoring. We have all this ground covered for them. And so I think the one thing they need to do is know it's there, from jump, and for having our leaders or our captains to help them understand, especially the young ones coming in, that it's okay to ask for help. I think that's something we talk a lot about, is that questions are a good thing. It's healthy, and it's important that we have conversations, and communication is of the utmost priority for us. We need to know what's going on in each other's lives. And for that, I think there's a real life integration in coaching. And if you don't have it, I'm not saying you need to do everything with your team, but I think there needs to be a realness and authenticity to it, that they understand they can come to you when something actually does happen, or before it's going to happen. And we've had those instances, and I'm grateful and thankful that we have such a great support team here. From Peter to all these people that we mentioned and the rest of the coaches, that I think there's a good family here. But you have to talk about it. I do think that's a big thing, and you have to have the ones that are your leaders or your counsel believe in it. So for them to reinforce it in their daily habits and say it's okay to put your phone down every once in a while, and it's okay to disconnect from the world and do things as a group, or open up to the people that are here in front of you. I think that's a large part of growing in that sphere of college.
Okay. So let's go back and talk a little bit more about what it takes to create winners as leaders. How do you create winners? So we know that as competition continues to intensify, and this is at the pro level as well as at the college level, and even going down into the Pop Warner youth era, strategies for winning are intensifying. So the use of analytics, the use of nutrition and different training mechanisms, are all part of how we can win now, and spending more money too, right? So, Jim, let's talk.
Coaches are good at spending more money.
Coaches are good at spending money. That's right. Athletic directors get it, and then the coaches spend it. So Jim, let's talk about analytics a little bit. So we're all familiar with the movie Moneyball from a few years ago, where they use data to try to predict incidences of success. How can we use data to help inform which players to recruit, when to put them, in the lineup, et cetera. Do you use data and analytics in your program? I know that at the School of Professional Studies, and Peter, you mentioned this when you mentioned our sports management program and our applied analytics master's program. They're studying these issues now, and they're working with coaches and leaders such as yourselves to help inform winning. Do you believe in it? Is it a bunch of hoopla, or is it something real? And let me ask you that first.
I may be the worst person to be asking about analytics because I stayed away from all the math classes I could when I was in college.
We have a program for you then.
I would come over, but I'm a little intimidated to even walk in the classroom. Yeah, there's definitely a place for it. I mean, everything now is analytic based. I mean, my daughter just took the SAT, and it's all based on analytics now. Like, we're trying to decide if she's going to take the SAT again, because they're saying that she can only go up a certain percentage, and is it worth it to take the test again? So I'm amazed at how much they're dead on with most of this stuff. That's the stuff that I'm learning. So yeah, I mean, from a professional standpoint for basketball, it's a huge piece of what we do now. People base a lot of decisions on the lineups, or you know, what a certain kid can do, and how you can put together pieces of your team to sort of be able to be the most efficient. So it's definitely a huge piece to what we do. I mean, a lot of the film that we have, Peter's very nice, and he gives us a lot of money to buy some film packages that we use. So we have a lot of film that we can watch, and then we can use, and then we can analyze that, and as we go through the practices and get to the games, we sort of use all that stuff to sort of try to make the most informed decisions that we can make.
So Al, we'll go from analytics to training. So we know there's a lot of news and press about performance-enhancing drugs and human growth hormone and the incidences of concussions, not only in football, but in lacrosse and soccer and other sports. But once you get past all of that, there's still a competitiveness in sports where good, healthy nutrition, good, wholesome, legal training can make a difference. So what is it that you do at Columbia to make sure that your players are optimizing their health and are in peak performance and able to compete at the highest level?
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate. We have really good support people. Our trainers are really good. Our nutritionist is really good. But it's a constant information flow to our kids, and a constant education of how much you really have to eat or not eat, depending on what you're trying to do. Our strength coaches are terrific, so they can analyze things. We spend an awful lot of time on the analytics, even in lifting. So we talk about analytics. We have it in football. It's probably the premier analytics sport, and it's gotten to the point now where it tells you whether or not the probabilities of 4th and 2, wherever the ball is, should you go for it or not, based on percentages. And if you just watch our team now, 19 times last year we went for it on 4th down, and it was all based on analytical study. So this is true now right across the board. So I think there's this huge knowledge base that's available to everybody. So available to coaches, to the people in the strength department, the nutritionalists, the medical people, and now it's available to the kids. And so it's just a process of giving them enough knowledge, information, and practical application where they can now, without expending too much energy to achieve all this, they can get their hands on correct nutrition. They can be in the right lifting program. We can do the right speed work for them. We can do the right things to stabilize them medically. We can do all those things just based on a composite workup and just based on all the information that we currently have. So it's getting really high tech.
And I'm glad that you mentioned knowledge, because educating the athletes in each one of those areas is really important, because you can be prepared to perform at a high level without cheating. Right? And so being able to educate and it was important that you distinguish that. You have all of the analytics, and you know what to do with nutrition, what to eat, how to lift, when to rest, when to repeat, et cetera. But if you don't truly educate the athletes themselves, then they may be incentivized to go a different route. And so it's good to see that you're doing that.
Yeah, and our kids are really inquisitive, I think, across the board.
Yeah.
So you better tell them why they're doing something. So they just, it's not like the old days where you do it and, okay. So why are we doing this? And you got to explain to them, all right,
That's right.
this is a 7% chance that this is going to happen, and give them some data and everything else. But I think that's the correct way to do it. And I think if you can justify what you're doing, and you can validate everything that you're trying to do with them, I think you have a tremendous amount of buy-in.
Yeah. Competitors continue to invest in new facilities, and new technology, and equipment. People will often ask the question, does all that stuff really matter? Does it really matter in terms of allowing these coaches to do well and to win? And if so, why does it matter?
Well, one thing, we have a tremendous support system with our donors and our alums and our former student athletes that really are invested in what we're trying to accomplish. And so hopefully we're good stewards with our money and making sure that we allocate it in the proper way where we'll get a good to use the business analogy, a good return on our investment. One thing that I really think spoke well is 2 years ago, we built a seasonal air bubble over our soccer field. And so we've told this story a couple times, but I was in a cab with Coach Bagnoli, and it ended up being a $10 million cab because he talked me into making sure that we did this bubble. And so I refused to get in a cab with him ever again because they're usually very costly. But it was a really sound investment. And so, I can remember the first day I started working at Columbia. I went to the morning workout, 6:15 in the morning with the football team, and it was snowing and it was blowing sideways, and they were out there running lines and running wind sprints and different things, and I thought, this is insane, at 6:15 in the morning in the middle of a snowstorm. So the bubble has paid tremendous benefits. If you look at our outside teams that play, this is the second season we've reaped the benefits of working out during the winter months. Our baseball team is playing for the Ivy League championship tomorrow, so they'll, have a chance to finish first. Our football team, Coach Bagnoli, we talked about earlier, had a great year and finished second, right outside, the opportunity to compete for the championship against Yale. Our softball team finished third. It's one of the highest finishes ever. Our women's lacrosse team made the Ivy League tournament for the first time ever. Field hockey finished third, and both our men's and women's soccer teams finished second. Our men's team went to the NCAA tournament and ended up losing to the #1 seed at Wake Forest. So we really feel like that paid a lot of benefits. And so if we look at the other opportunities with other sports, specifically men's and women's basketball, we feel like the resources that can come in can be properly allocated in a way that we can best utilize them to get a pretty significant impact on terms of success in all aspects of what we're trying to accomplish. We have phenomenal graduation rates. We have amazing team GPAs. We had 326 student athletes last year that were on the dean's list, and we had 50 student athletes that had 4.0 GPAs. So we really feel like we have remarkable young men and young women that represent Columbia Athletics, and we need to continue to look for opportunities to enhance what we're trying to do. Obviously, we're all competitive. We want to compete for championships, so there's a lot of different opportunities that present themselves for us to get better.
So we've talked a lot today about the role of sports in higher education, and obviously the role of athletics within Columbia University has had a significant impact on the university. So Peter, I'll come back to you again. You have 3 dynamic coaches here once again who have won, who are really changing the landscape of their respective sports. What do you do as a leader, though, as the athletic director of Columbia University, to continue to recruit coaches, to develop the coaches we currently have, and to recruit new coaches to fulfill the same mold?
Well, I think it's important to understand the complexities of being at Columbia. If you look, Megan obviously went to school, so she has a completely different skill set in terms of identifying the challenges of being a student athlete. And Coach Bagnoli worked at Penn for 20 plus years and has been at Columbia, so he understands the complexity. And Jim the head coach now, was a former assistant. So I think there really is a value in finding somebody that understands the dynamics and the complexities of coaching within the Ivy Leagues. And as I said before, we need to hire coaches that are mentors and leaders and role models and teachers and educators that can really play a role in shaping the lives of the young men and young women that we interact with. It really is that 40-year education, that 40-year opportunity that really builds and shapes itself while they're at Columbia.
That's great. So Megan, the theme of Talks at Columbia is learning for life. And at the School of Professional Studies, we're all about lifelong learning. What do you do to continue to develop yourself as a leader, as a role model, as a motivator, as a recruiter, as a winner?
All of the above, continual growth process. For me, it's surrounding myself with great people whenever I can. One of the first things I did when I got hired was sit with this man. And, we had every year I go up in May and sit with Coach Bagnoli and just pick his brain about what did you do to get where you are. And, and I've had a lot of talks with Jim about, for him, same thing. He's been coaching way longer than I have. Everybody has a nugget for me. And, Michael Offertig, who's our fencing coach, national champions, sit down with him. And so that's just using the network within what we have. But also on a greater scheme and scale of that is making sure that when I just have an ear to the street all the time with recruiting. I think recruiting is absolutely the most important thing that I can be doing right now, is bringing in the people that can help us build this culture. We're all talking about a championship culture. And so for me, it's making sure that no net is cast shallow, like Coach Bagnoli was talking about. And, we're making sure that we're covering all of our bases and we have dynamic people on staff that are making me and us better. We can't hire people that are, like we're just making the decisions for them. To me, it's that we need people around us that are just going to make us better every day. So surrounding yourself with, people like that. And I think that goes hand in hand with your recruits. You want people like your non-negotiables. They're going to have those. They're going to value those things. So there's those things, and then whenever just sniffing out opportunities to learn the game, grow the game, going to clinics, when I'm on the road, making sure that I'm meeting with other coaches, going to workouts, doing different things like that. So, and reading a ton. I think that's something we can all do whenever we can. So that's big for us.
That's good. Jim, the opposite side for you, you have been coaching for a long time. You have a wealth of experience, winning, succeeding, losing. You've done it all. Not much losing though, so maybe you can't advise too much. What kind of mentoring do you do? What are the hallmarks of your mentoring philosophy when you mentor people like Megan and other coaches who don't have as much experience? How do you frame that relationship?
I'll piggyback off what Megan said. I think, you do have a circle of advisors or board of directors, people that you have to count on because coaching is not just basketball. There's a lot of things that, as a basketball coach, it's not just, X's and O's. And when I got into basketball is something I always wanted to do. When I was little, it's very rare that when you're, like, I guess when you're 5 years old, someone wants to be an astronaut or someone wants to be a fireman. I mean, very rarely do you do exactly what you wanted to do when you were 5 years old. So I got really lucky and blessed to be able to do this. And I think that type of enthusiasm, you have to carry that with you. So I've been doing at Division I basketball now for 31 years now, I think. And I think you have to carry that newness to you all the time. So all the stuff that Megan talks about is exactly what I feel like Megan. Megan's, a new head coach. She's been a head coach now, this will be her third year. And I think a lot of times you have to feel like you're a new head coach because you have to continue to push yourself and learn. And you have to use, I think the one thing that I've been lucky with the years that I've been doing this is that I have a bunch of people that I can call when I'm having some issues that can help me and give me some different ideas about how you're supposed to look at certain circumstances. Because like I said, coaching is a lot more about, basically run your own business. So there's a lot of things that go into that. So, running the budget is something that you have to rely on people to talk about all the time, That's why we're out here in California, right? Let's not lie. We didn't come out for the talks at Columbia here, guys.
This is
we did.
This is a vehicle. This is a vehicle, Jim.
Well,
right?
you destroyed my college, so I'm not going to.
This is payback, right?
It's payback.
Okay, Al, we'll end with you. When we're talking about the role of sports in higher education, we have to remember this is all about education. So we're developing young people for a professional life and for life as men and women. So when you talk to parents, what do you say about how you will take care of their boys, transition them into men, and prepare them for the world of work, prepare them for professional lives, prepare them to be good stewards, good alumni of Columbia University and representatives? Aside from the football talk, what do you say about preparing them for life?
Yeah, I think you always have to win over mom. That's the first thing I've ever learned in recruiting. So it starts off with you have to get mom on campus. And I've been to 2 urban schools, and that's been the key. If you have any chance of recruiting he or she, you better get mom on campus. And you better have a built-in confidence and trust that we're going to do really good work with their most precious commodity. A smart guy told me. You're dealing with their most precious commodity. Make sure they understand that you're going to be there for them. And it's not like you have to say, okay, we're going to make it easy for them, because that's not really what you're trying to do. You're really trying to get a maturation, a growth. You're trying to see how much can you push him. But you also know that if he does go into trouble, that we're going to be there for him, that we're one big collective family, even though we're 112 kids, that they have a support system that's built in. And it goes back to that trust factor, that if there is an issue, they have the trust and the confidence to come in, spend some time with the coach. It could be me, it could be the positional coach, it could be the recruiting coach, but just to get stuff resolved. And we know that we value them, and not just for athletes and how many games can you win, but we try to value them as human beings and all the great things that we do and all the great things they do in the classroom. They give back to society, the things that we're doing to represent the school and the alumni base. And I think if you can develop that kind of relationship with a kid, I think then you're preparing them. But, you know, at the same time, we're trying to really push them. And I don't think kids really understand their ceiling. And so you're always constantly trying to push them greater than what they think they're capable of doing. And when you can do that at the end of 4 years, you know, you have a really successful kid, a mature, dynamic, confident, mature kid. And that's what you're trying to get.
Absolutely. Well, you've heard here today that Columbia University is in the midst of a very dynamic transformation of success in athletics, attributed to our athletic director and our coaches here. I want to thank you all for joining us for this special edition of Talks at Columbia. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Jim. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you
all.